Namaskar and welcome to this new session of Sattology Debunking Mythology. I have a very special guest. I have been wanting her to come and speak to all of us for a long time. She's an activist, she is an influencer, and also you'll find out more when we talk to her. She has clear dharmic and political views. She has been a very famous journalist, a big supporter of Prime Minister Modi. She is currently work with Indian Institute of Social Sciences, and also she is a teacher. I mean, if you look at her tweets and everything, she's predicting things. She's working on absolutely current issues. She has views which are important to Indians. May not be important to us, but for Indians it is very important. And there are 1.3 billion people. So now here we have this lady, and we're going to have a very frank conversation, but very comfortable one, so that she can educate us. Uh, so with that, let us welcome, some of you have guessed it because you know it, some of you not, is Madhu Kishwar from Delhi, India. So, namaskar.
You forgot to mention that I earn my living from academia. I happen to be a professor, currently National Professor, Indian Council of Social Science Research. My journalism is not my livelihood. I didn't want my pen to be enslaved or to write at command. Therefore, I chose academia, which gives me all the freedom I want to say what I want, when I want, and how I want.
I apologize, but there's so many things to tell about you, but this is wonderful. So for students, this is a great learning opportunity. So in this channel, we debunk all the mythology attached to the Indian culture and scriptures, which is often put by the Western universities. So, Madhuji, can we ask you first question with this regard is, can you tell us more about yourself to the world and to all these students, and what you have been doing to make a change in the current atmosphere, which is heavily influenced by the left, either in the US or in the India?
Tell me more about myself. I mean, what do I tell about myself? I was
About
born in Delhi. I come from a family of partition refugees and maternal family, which was also based in Kashmir, from where also they got uprooted. So we've all settled in Delhi. I was born here. I went to school in Delhi most of the years here. For some years, I studied in Jalandhar, where my father was posted. Then I studied in Miranda House, Delhi University. Went on to Jawaharlal Nehru University, and that too history department. So I am a JNU history department survivor. After which I started teaching in a college in Delhi University, and after some years, Center for the Study of Developing Societies. It's a social science research center. They invited me to be on their faculty. So for about 20 years, I was with the CSDS. And thereafter, I've been awarded this National Professorship of Indian Council of Social Science Research. In 1978, as a young lecturer, I founded Manushi, a human rights, women's rights organization, and the flagship project or work of Manushi Trust. It's a trust, non-profit trust, was the journal named Manushi. And the whole idea of starting this journal was that since I came from this heavily left saturated background, in the sense that when I was a student of Delhi University, that time too, this whole Nakshal movement was on the first, had begun to rise, the Maoist, the Nakshal movement. Thereafter, then JNU, and I started my public life as president, first vice president, then president of Miranda House Students Union. And you will be shocked to know that I was fielded by the student wing of CPM as their presidential candidate, first woman presidential candidate for Delhi University Students Union. But that 1.5 year of my interaction with CPM convinced me that there isn't a more dangerous and a more unhealthy political formation possible. And I not only left, I was among the founder members of the SFI in Delhi University. I left in utter disgust, and with me, 2/3 of the students walked out too. And I think that's something the CPM, the left, didn't forgive me. Even as student union president, you see, during my time, we didn't fight for the usual, students going on strike over this frivolous issue, that frivolous issue, free bus service, this, that, and the other. For example, when I entered Miranda House, one of the most prestigious activities used to be the Miss Miranda Beauty Contest.
Yes.
And it struck me as bizarre that a beauty cutie should be selected and given this title. So when I became vice president and then president, I ran a very consistent, solid campaign against it. And we got the student body with a 97% vote to say there shall be no more beauty contest in Miranda House. The title, if at all has to be given, should be given to the best all-round student, not to this beauty cutie Barbie doll. And we did a lot more other things, like, for example, got ourselves representation to the governing body of the college, to the academic council. These were the issues we fought for. Better library facilities, better teaching facilities. I was much more concerned. Student unions normally bring in issues, national, international issues, Soviet Union versus Yugoslavia versus US, imperialism, all that. I believe that students should stay grounded in their own environment. First, take charge of their own environment, make it better, make teaching quality better, make it that more responsive, make student living conditions better. I mean, things weren't particularly good. So those issues, from bathroom hygiene, cleaner bathrooms, Indian bathrooms as opposed to Western commode bathrooms. I mean, these were some of the issues, quality of life, and also fought for better working conditions for the class 4 employees, the mess staff, the security guards of Miranda. So those were the kind of things. And therefore, since I was the first woman to get active in these kind of issues and lead the union, towards this direction, everybody assumed I was left, because you talk of workers' rights, you talk of women's dignity, you're talking of all these, democratic rights of students, their representation in decision-making bodies. So in those days, I used to be quite a star, simply because there weren't many women who were doing what I was doing, and certainly not battling the male citadels of power within the university and male-dominated student union bodies. So that's how I started my public life.
Thank you so much. I think you gave a very good insight into who you are. We know you, but many of the students...
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, we think that it just happened yesterday. So you are very young and you're inspiring all of us. Just happened yesterday. So you mentioned some very important points, and recently President Trump also came out with a tweet saying then how the left has taken over American institutions. And many of our students also going through that, where they see a foreign ideologies affecting the student lives more than the local things. Never before an American university environment has been so influenced by issues which doesn't concern American life. It has come from abroad, and it is being, I would say, hosted on top of these students' heads as if it is their issue, but it is not. Like issue from Palestine, issues from Kashmir, issues from other parts of the world, which most even I did not see them. Just 5 years back, I did not see any of those things. But nowadays there are graffitis on the colleges, campuses, talking about Kashmir. What does U.S. American students have to do with Kashmir? Nothing. And what do American
Karmic
students?
vengeance, if you ask me, because for long decades, America insisted on playing the global policeman. And it went around messing around in other countries' lives and bombing here and a war there. Within its own territories, everything was peaceful. But globally, America was pitching one state against the other, provoking wars, provoking enmities, Vietnam, Cambodia, the Middle East. What a messy world they created. So I guess it's that karmic legacy. Now their students want more interested. I mean, want to decide policy on Kashmir before they decide the educational policy in American universities. That's a pity, and but that's the nature of the left. Because how else do you manipulate? You drag students, and which is why when I started Manushi, I was so sick and tired. That was soon after JNU. When I started Manushi, I was in my 20s. And the whole idea was the left always dragged you onto international issues. It's very easy to manipulate you when you don't know anything about Yugoslavia versus Cuba versus, you expected to take stands on that. And all depends on the brainwashing power of your professors, the ideologues. They let loose on you. And the other thing they always do is to use seductive power of the opposite gender. Whether in JNU or DU, I saw it. They tried practicing it on me also, but I think they didn't succeed. Which is that they let loose the prettiest girls on, these young boys and vice versa. They rope you in through offering you this very cool, hip circle of friends. It's the cocktail circuit of permanent partying, not just partying in the sense of political party, but it's it looks like you've arrived. You're put in touch with stars, film stars, known writers. You become part of this elite circle. So that's there, and I think Manushi was in many ways a response or a rejection of left politics. And which is why we said, A, it's going to focus on India. B, that we will not sit in Delhi and decide what people of India, women of India want. We will listen. This is a platform which will devote all its energies to listening, observing directly the life condition of people in our country, try to understand their problems through their eyes, and understand India in all its diversity as well as its commonalities. What is it that binds us together, as well as what is it that makes this country unique in its enormous diversity? What are the problems that people are confronting? How do we assist them in achieving the goals that they are not able to achieve because somebody's powers that be are thwarting them? So Manushi was always heavily biased in favor of rural areas because majority of people still live there, as well as keeping ourselves away from just our own obsessions, because elite sections of any society tend to think that their concerns ought to be the concerns of everybody. And we wanted people to understand that while our problems may be important, but there are far more important issues at hand, and we need to be able to connect with those and understand India before we try to even pretend to solve their problems. The problem with the left is they don't think they need to know anything. They don't think they need to be connected to people's lives. They don't need to know what the problems of people are and what their aspirations are. They decide what their problems are, they decide what the aspiration should be. So they think class struggle should be the aspiration, class war should be the aspiration. Whereas the fact is, the poor would rather be upwardly mobile, become middle class. They don't want war, they want to better their condition. Now, this common sense thing the left doesn't understand, which is why they're failing globally. But they don't learn this, so arrogant. And they know how to capture positions of power, especially universities and all those institutions. They capture the soft power, software generating institutions, the universities, the media, the cultural institutions, etc. And so they run the narrative and put everybody on the defensive.
No, you are absolutely right. And out instead of calling them the software or the operating system, actually they are the virus in the software of the operating system.
Well said.
So,
Well,
so, so
more
here,
dangerous than corona, more dangerous than AIDS virus, because they destroy the body's immunity and the inner health of the body. And truly, that virus needs to be gotten rid of sooner than later. If you retain it beyond 22, 23, then that means there's a personality disorder you're going to be living with forever.
and I know you touched a very important point, and students, I want to, and please correct me. You have more experience than me in this area. Uh, I have seen that when a young student who is left, when they reach the age of 40, they come on the right because they've seen the life and they start understanding where they were wrong in the past. I've seen many people admitting that also. There's one politician I met in the American politician. I don't want to name him, but he's from my district in San Diego. And he said that when I was young, I was part of them, but when I became 40, I became normal. That's what he said.
No, but you see, maybe the Indian elite is smarter, which is that most of my generation, who were foaming and frothing at the mouth in the name of the proletariat and the poor farmers, who, as a youngster, 16-year-old, when I entered the university, would give me these pious lectures on the plight of the poor, what needs to be done. All of them, once they were through with their education, elite education, St. Stephen's, this, that, and the other, they joined either the IS or the Indian Foreign Service, or they went to American universities. And here I was, refusing to become ideologically brainwashed, and I stuck. I stuck where I am, decided my life is going to be for India, and I will live in India. I'm not going to study abroad, because I know most of them come back brainwashed. I mean, the brain is so damaged, especially in the humanities departments. Science is okay, because then you're on territory where you need to compete with the best and come out a winner. But in the humanities, I sensed it right then that they insist American universities will put you in the ghetto of South Asian studies. Now, what is South Asia? This is India, the Indian subcontinent. They suddenly made us South Asians. It's not a category that we recognize. This is not a name we recognize for ourselves. So they all, so that they can put you in the same box as Pakistan, that rogue state called Pakistan, and other whatever else they wish to. And then you're in that ghetto. I can't couldn't for the life of me understand why somebody from India would go to America, not to study American history, not to be an economist advising the American economy or intervene in that. Many of you have gone into politics, but that's different, not through the university route. Now, sociology, India, why don't they work on American issues? Why? Because they'll be given the boot. Nobody lets them. So you already put yourself in the role of native informants, and you're doing the bidding of your masters. So you are expected then to operate within certainly negative stereotypes that the American universities have decided to project about India. And that if you don't conform, you're booted out. There's no scope. Even here, that's how people get into becoming professional India bashers, Hindu bashers, because it pays. It's the most remunerative career option to be a India basher.
No, you're so right. You're so right. Actually, you started in all the right notes when you mentioned about the soft way they approach, and they bring issues which actually fool a young mind, by which makes them think that these are the people who are thinking about the good of the world, and that's how many of these young students get brainwashed, and then people who are watching live, this is the fact. And secondly, the thing is the scourge of Western funding, which is American taxpayers are funding these universities. And I will particularly talk about Harvard because many students are from Harvard right now. So it's a vicious cycle. American university and the Indian university trying to get a recognition in the Western world, they tie up, and it's a one-way flow of money and one-way flow of ideas. I think this is a fantastic ploy by many of the Chinese, the Russians, and also the Middle Eastern, particularly Qatari money, playing into the big role in the American universities today. So you captured it right way, and you started in the right
But
tone.
let me tell you the smartest thing that I ever did in my life, which saved me from the slippery slope that goes straight to hell and perdition, which is that when I started Manushi, I have no idea. I was very young, and at that time, much of this funding mischief was not known because the foreign funding organizations had just about landed in India at that time. I have no idea, some divine inspiration that when I started Manushi way back in 1978-79, I vowed, I didn't even ask anybody, honestly, as the founder of Manushi, I made a resolve and we announced it on the very first page of the first issue of the magazine that we will not accept foreign funding. And we went so far as to say we will not even accept Indian government funding, because government funding tends to tie you up in many devious knots. But certainly never. My own government I can still fight with. But foreign funding, money, the Ford Foundations and the Rockefellers and now the Bill Gates and all that, they come with agendas. And what used to amaze me, that especially, say, my feminist friends, who would tell women how they have to be financially independent, they shouldn't depend on their father, they shouldn't depend on their husband, that life is crippling. But then, when they set up their little tiny NGOs, they all took foreign money. Manushi was the only one which said no. We were wooed vigorously because Manushi, from the very first issue of the journal, it went global. I have no idea how. I never sent one free copy to anybody of our journal, but it went global on its own steam. And so we had many offers from foreign funders, including the Ford, offering to bankroll it. And I kept saying no. To me, it's a matter of self-esteem. If I want to take on or give my life to addressing the problems of the people of my country, the least I owe to myself is to dip into my own pocket and give, not take. Because what these foreign funded NGOs are assured is a 5-star life. They're forever jet setting, business class, first class, living 5-star luxury. And then they're supposed to occasionally produce a report or two on the pathetic plight of this or that group, on the pathetic plight of women. So I used to laugh at them and say, you don't want women to be dependent on their husbands or their fathers or their brothers, but you are willing to be dependent on godfathers sitting far away who then pull strings and make you dance to their tunes. What kind of autonomy or independence this is about? So hypocrisy is so rampant in left, and especially feminist and left together. Oh my God, it's a deadly combination. So that's how I say to myself. And though it's been a very hard journey, because if you are operating on a shoestring budget, the only income you have is whatever you get from the sales of your publications, the research, or the occasional documentary films I made. The rest is all giving. It's not easy. You often have to shed blood where only sweat is required. But then I think it allowed Manushi to survive with self-respect and its credentials intact. That matters to me a lot more than to be wealthy and have, all the luxuries of life, to be jet setting around. That life is so phony, and they seduce you to it. And the lure of foreign university lectures and jobs and assignments. I mean, people sell their soul for it. And this India bashing that they learn, I used to in fact laugh at all my leftist friends of yore, saying, the way you go about it, it's like trained pigeons, If it's like if someone gave you $5,000 for every time you spat on your mother's face, you would begin to believe it's the smartest thing on earth, and you would spit on your own mother's face 10 times a day so that you can earn big money and think you're a big smart, dude, because you're earning so much money for spitting on your mother's face. And that's exactly the kind of India bashing. Unintelligent. I mean, I'm a very sharp critic of my government where it goes wrong. And you said I'm a supporter of Modi, but ask Modi, he says I'm his toughest critic. At a particular point in time, yes, I supported Modi, and in many issues I still do. But when he takes measures that are not good for India, I'm the first one to stand up and say, this won't do. Please don't take people's support for granted on everything. And one can do that only because one is not dependent, even on our own government.
No, in the US, I think your views are very, very in conform as most of us. And I think one point that you very well made about the glamour of the left, and we have great examples of ultra left people like Pramila Jayapal, who don't miss a single chance to criticize India while being in the power in Washington's 7th state. Another great example is Ro Khanna, whose parents came from India. He's a first generation India, and I call him ABCD, American born confused Deshi. And now he is also a congressman, doesn't wait a single point to criticize India. And these two people, they owe everything to India. Now, I'll just little bit say a few words, you know better than me, and then I'll ask you a question. The bashing India has become a hobby in the left.
No, it's a lucrative career option. Oh, please don't call it hobby. It's the most lucrative career option. I'm just putting the charger back on my computer.
Yes,
it's not a hobby. It's a profession. And these are paid foot soldiers. You see, handsomely paid or poorly paid is not the issue. The issue is that they're doing a hit job for money and for privileges that come with it, which otherwise wouldn't come. I mean, there are many of these people who become professional India bashers. They wouldn't get a peon's job otherwise if they were to be judged by their academic worth.
Yeah,
They may not even get a clerical job in the departments over which they lord over. I can say that for a lot of Indians that I know. But because you're willing to play that game, so it's, and because you're so well rewarded, you see, human nature is such that when you're rewarded for doing XYZ, you think it's, and by people in positions of power, you think it's the smartest thing on earth to do. And they would even spit on their mother's face doing that.
no, I stand corrected. They are the, they are not, they're not, they are actually, it's a profession for them.
It's
It's
a
a
profession
profession.
and a very lucrative one.
Very lucrative profession. And I think those people who are listening and students who do not like the views, they can switch off the TV, because I'm going to ask a very good question to her. Now, many of
Don't
the,
say that. Why should they switch off the TV? They can bang at me. They can pose questions. I'm willing to face criticism. I'm willing to respond to answers. Please don't say. I don't believe in having an echo chamber where you have only people who agree with you. What's the point of talking? I may as well talk to the mirror.
so my so there is a lobbies, like very strong lobbies called justice lobbies, and there are also another lobbies called liberal conservative lobbies. Now these are the people who put money, and these are foreign funds, in the name of buying a chair in American universities. And people like Audrey Truschke and Peter Frederick. Now these are the people who are like their lapdogs, and who flourish on this money, and their only lucrative, like that's how they show their performance to their masters, is to create some nonsense. And there's another journalist called Mehdi Hassan, which is a big nuisance in this category, where
Quest to you is this: let them do, let them degrade their lives to the extent they can. I think we shouldn't be wasting so much time on them. I, in fact, rarely read them. I don't want to waste my energy on them. And the one and only reason the left has never been able to attack me is all the things that they claim are their monopoly, namely working for the poor, working for the minorities, working for women, working for that. I've done it hands on all my life, far better than them. So they cannot accuse me of being anti-poor. They cannot accuse me of being anti-women. My life has been devoted hands-on, working for street vendors, working for cycle rickshaw pullers, working with farmers' movements, working for tribal women's rights. All these are long battles. I, for example, worked for 25 long years to have the government of India write a new law for street vendors of India, because they are among the worst victims of statist controls, forever removed. They don't have security because people think they're a nuisance. They operate in a web of illegality. So also the cycle rickshaw pullers. Now I spent more than 25 years of my life advocacy, research, making films, holding public hearings, pushing the government to recognize the problem, going to court, High Court, Supreme Court, fighting it all the way. And the very court that used to call them vermin, filth, squalor, then saying their right to livelihood deserves to be enshrined as a constitutional right. It should be honored as part of the constitutional right to livelihood, and therefore a new law. So the point that I'm trying to make is, all what the wrong we have committed, those who are not with the left, is that they have given the left a monopoly, at least the verbal monopoly, over issues of social justice, issues of working for the disadvantaged sections, working for women's rights. If you're hands-on there, and their own track record is so poor that it doesn't take very much not to respond and react to them because by reacting, we're giving them more importance than they deserve. I mean, Audrey, right? Bullshit. And yet, we have allowed her to acquire star status because we get agitated by the bullshit she writes. And she's venal. I mean, why are we wasting time on her? And the best compliment one can pay such paid hirelings, is to ignore them and do show what actually good history is about, show what good activism is about, show what good legal advocacy is about. All that you need to demonstrate concretely. And mind you, this is something one should learn from Gandhi, whether you agree with him or not. All their lives, the leftists kept on criticizing Gandhi as a lackey of imperialism, as this, that, and the other. They called him the foulest names. And why? Because they wanted him to adopt their agenda. Now, Gandhi never stopped them from following their agenda. He said, you do what you think is right. I'm doing what I think is right. And you've seen how the left didn't count for much, except for nuisance value, especially during the phase when India's partition was being decided. They opted for Pakistan against India, Indian leftists. And they wanted India to be broken up into 17 parts. Why? Because their godfather Stalin said so. And they were on Soviet Union's payroll. But then they were marginalized so long as Gandhi led and followed what he thought ought to be the agenda. It's Nehru who brought them forth, because Nehru wanted to destroy the Congress party, wanted to destroy the Gandhian legacy, wanted to destroy Sardar Patel and all the tallest Congress leaders who were rooted in patriotism. That's what Nehru wanted to destroy. So he brought in the leftists to destroy his own party, the intellectual tradition. Congress party politicians produced some of the tallest ideologues also. Best historians came from within the Congress stream. Nehru destroyed them all. Why? Because he knew he was not popular among his own party people. He stole the prime ministership from Sardar Patel, who won by a handsome majority, and therefore he relied on the left to sideline all that. But so long as Gandhi was alive, left could not count for much, and because Gandhi defined his own agenda. And I'm saying we need to do the same. We need to show what needs to be done better than them. And since their standards aren't really very high, it doesn't take very much to beat them at their own rhetorical game, but with concrete action.
No, you're absolutely right. The condescending attitude of the left it is usually such that it influences a lot of people. Now, in the American campuses, now it's election time, and elections are in November, just 2-3 months down the line. In this election season, in USA also, the fight between left and right is way out in the open now. Democrats are on the mostly ultra left, and the Republicans are either centrists, which you call conservatives, or some of them are right also, the extreme right. But in a pure sense of the word, is actually the fight between the left and the right. And now coming back to the question that so there's one question has come from Alice from the University of Maryland, and she has done a lot of Hindu studies. And I'm asking on your behalf to her, since you cannot access the microphone for this show. So she says that she had so far thought that the only author she ever met were Audrey Truschke and Peter Frederick. And for the first time, because of Sattology, that's what we do, debunking mythology, we are meeting you, who is debunking them openly. So tell us what they are doing which we should know, and what they are not doing, that also we should know. In summary, then she's going to buy your books.
I mean, I can talk about Audrey Tushke. She tries to make Aurangzeb, of all the Islamists, she has chosen one of the most hateful figures, the most hated figure, a figure that even most majority of Muslims are embarrassed about, because he was such a bigot and he ran such a tyrannical regime. Hindus had to live as not as third class citizens, but had to undergo forced conversions. And the kind of atrocities he let loose, which is very common. Islam, when it conquers, it gives you only one option: death or conversion. Death or conversion. And he believed in that. And therefore, wherever he could, he practiced a very tyrannical policy of conversions, destroying Hindu temples. It became impossible for Hindus to even practice their own faith anywhere in public. Do you know that, for example, in North India, the first hundreds and thousands of Hindu temples were thousands and thousands of Hindu temples were destroyed during this Islamic rule of India, each leading to massive massacres. Each foreign invasion that came led to massive massacres that they have proudly talked about. Capture of women in lakhs, in hundreds of thousands, selling them as sex slaves, putting them in Mughal harems, selling them in the sex markets, bazaars of the Middle East, and looting, destroying, coercive conversions. Most Islamic rulers were known for that, but Aurangzeb was particularly vicious about it. And he also killed his own brothers to come to the throne. He imprisoned his own father, Shah Jahan, to take the throne. His brother was a more liberal Dara Shikoh. He got him murdered. That's the kind of man he was. And she wants, Audrey Tushke wants us to believe he was one of the most enlightened rulers that India ever saw. She's full of praise from God knows where, because even Aurangzeb would be embarrassed at the kind of praise she heaps on him. And it's like pouring wounds on our salts. You see, if Hindus have undergone 1,000 years of the most barbaric Islamic invasions, leading to mass conversions, sex slavery, brutalities of an untold, undescribable kind. And mind you, these are not things I'm saying. Hindus, by the way, never wrote about what was happening to them. They handle it very differently. It's their own record, their own court historians, their own, Islamic, what shall I say, writers who documented all that with pride. How they would build mountains of skulls, for example. How many tons of janeus every day they would, So, I mean, the stories are horrific. Exactly what ISIS is doing in Syria. You've seen what kind of terror they unleashed. What they do in Afghanistan. They don't let anybody, or what Pakistan is doing every day. At the time of partition, there were about 28% Hindus there. Today, less than 1.5% left. So that massive a genocide. Now, if people want to defend Pakistan against India, they should know all this. And it's not just Hindus. Christians have a similar fate awaiting them. Different sects within Islam are forever at each other's throats. And Audrey Tushke picks up the most hated Mughal emperor, after whom the Mughal empire sunk precisely because he was so atrocious and so tyrannical that the empire itself sank under the weight of his tyranny and bigoted actions. And she wants us to believe that he was a very enlightened ruler. Now, what do you say to that woman? Obviously, it's a paid job, because even Muslims don't feel embarrassed. Most Muslims, at least well-informed Muslims, feel embarrassed about it. And you know, one proof of how Aurangzeb is rated? The Islamic intellectuals and artists worked very hard to glorify Mughal rule. So that you have very glamorous Bollywood films on Akbar, on Jahangir, on Shah Jahan, but not a single one on Aurangzeb. Which means even they dare not show him in any positive light. With the others, they managed with a lot of effort, piecing together, but they never show Mughal emperors in action as emperors. They only show us their love stories. So Akbar's love story as a young Salim with Anarkali, real or imagined. Shah Jahan with his Mehrunisa and all that. They don't dare show what they actually were doing. So what they do is they weave romance around them, which never existed. For most of them were hardly besotted lovers. They had harems. Even Akbar had a harem with 3,000 Rajput princesses. So whoever he defeated, he forced that whichever king. And these are things that Hindus find atrocious. Having a harem of 3,000 princes from the homes of you captured them by defeating that particular royal house, and you captured the women. And which is why you should know that women used to commit what's called jawhar. They would jump into the fire in order to escape being captured by Mughals or by Islamic rulers in case the kings got defeated, the Rajput or Marathas or whoever. Now, these are the kind of people she wants to portray in very positive light. Have I answered your question?
Alice, yes, she's happy with the answer. She just wants to know about Peter Frederick also.
I don't know his work, but what I can do is I can do my homework.
No need to study him because he's as left as Audrey, so we have to ignore him.
It's not left. See, again, I don't believe in this left-right binary. Firstly, it's the most idiotic binary ever created, and only brainless leftists could do that. Firstly, it comes from the French history, because a certain group of people who voted X way and the others, were on the left or the right side of, and so they were termed leftists and rightists. Firstly, it has nothing to do with American history. It is certainly zilch to do with Indian history. Why the hell should I accept the labels that certain group of people in France adopted for themselves? It was good for them if they were comfortable with it, with their own historical background, but it has nothing to do with my history. And the left in India certainly doesn't live up to its proclaimed ideals. So I don't accept left-right, because I like to be left-wing, not right-wing. I like to fly on both wings, walk on both legs, work with both hands, not with one, whether left or right. And for the left, the term right is a term it's a pejorative. So I refuse to accept that pejorative as my self-definition, simply because I'm against their venal politics.
I'm glad you made that point. I'm glad you made that point. I wrote an article long back. We are neither left nor right. We are dharmic. So it's more centrist. So in terms of one last question before the time is up, and this question.
They tried labeling Gandhi also as rightist, but they failed because he didn't accept that label, and the world didn't accept that label for Gandhi. And if Gandhi could withstand their label, I think I too can do so.
Yes, it's Peter Frederick is the name of that professor, and he writes very obnoxious. So Alice, we'll get back to you, and you can also write in the comments also, Alice, in the chat.
And anyone who wants to get in touch with me, please, Madhu Kishwar, Madhu Kishwar @ Manushi, MANUSHI.in. I always attend to every mail personally and respond personally.
The last question is, I think his name is Tanwar Ali, and he's a student at University of Memphis. Uh, he's doing a Hindu studies. He's doing Hindu studies because he wants to learn more on Hinduism, and he's very impressed with your talk. And his question one is that why Indian historians do not counter in their own books, and why it is left to others to defend. So that's what his question is.
Anwar Bhai, very good question. It's not that Indian historians don't do it, it's just that the left has had such a vicious monopoly ever since 1947. And as I mentioned earlier, because Nehru wanted to destroy his own party and he wanted to survive on the strength of the left, so he gave them all the, especially the education portfolio, the culture ministry, all the key positions that determine the educational curriculum. It was handed over on a silver platter to the leftists. They had such a monopoly that the best of our historians were sidelined, defamed, hounded, and you couldn't get a job even till very recently if you didn't fall in line. One of the reasons, even after studying history and getting very good grades in JNU, I didn't go to teach history because I knew that the JNU history gang, mind you, some of them very fond of me. They really wanted me to be part of their gang. And I was a very top-notch student. And it's not that they would have been averse to having me in there, but I didn't want to fall in line because I knew then I'd have to sell my soul. I wouldn't have survived if I had taken up a history teaching job. They would have hounded me out, and they did so. Even with Manushi, we had to face such terrible defamation, stabbing, backstabbing, takeover, coups. Left is very good at coups. We faced 3 serious coups. They're trying to take over Manushi. Twice I even handed over and said, try running it without money because we have no, big money. They didn't know what to do because left can only thrive if there's big money, power, and prestige, and all the rest of it. So they didn't let, and if you want to be in touch with me, I'll put you in touch with historians, which did outstanding work, but they were all marginalized, they were all harassed, they were all hounded, and even up to me, if ever I were to write my autobiography, a good deal of it would have to come, would revolve around the harassment, the discrimination, the hounding I faced at the hands of the left. It's not easy to survive them, but I survived them, and I'm glad that they couldn't destroy me, though they tried their best to marginalize. But if you're not too ambitious, you can survive them.
Yeah, Krishna and Ram saved you, and therefore.
Some divine power. Definitely we have Manushi Swachnaraini, our 10-armed goddess, broom-wielding goddess. Yes, I think some divine power saved me. And also what saved me is not being over-ambitious. Focusing on the work to be done, not necessarily climbing up. If I was desperate, for example, to get a job in one of the foreign universities, I would have to play by the rules. I said I didn't want to. If I had to be a careerist, even within India, I would have to fall in line. I chose not to be a careerist. So I survived with whatever came my way without having to grovel before them, without having to fight with them, but made sure they could not tamper with my space. My space was my own, and they couldn't. I didn't let them dominate that little space. I kept its sanctity. And Manushi allowed me to do that because it was something we created with our own hard labor, without any patronage, either state patronage or any other patronage.
Thank you so much. And I know time is up. And for viewers for asking such wonderful questions, and keep debunking all mythology. Understand that myth is imagination, Sat is truth. So search for truth, and in Sattology, try to debunk as many historical wrongs that you have been done in terms of writing. We encourage all of you to write also. Sattology.org portal is open for all the writers of history. They can write, they can correct, and they can publish it. Now with
Work hard, work hard. First is hard work. No lazy writing. No easy pot shots. The key to defeating the left is to work harder than them.
exactly.
And if you don't do that, you may as well not. And as I said, in our culture, we consider the pen as sacred. This is Ma Saraswati, the goddess of learning. And which means the moment you hold this in your hand, you have to actually tune yourself to doing justice to the sacredness of this instrument. Writing is a sacred activity, at least in Hindu tradition. And when you treat it as a sacred activity, you will not lie, you will not overstate, you will not exaggerate, not even to defeat them, because they're so full of lies. It's very easy to defeat them with facts. So, hard work, and consider writing as a sacred activity. And then wrong things will not flow out of your pen. That's my appeal and request to all of you.
Thank you so much, Madhukeshwarji, for coming. Madhukeshwar at manushi.in. Please write to her. Help her. You guys are all of you are good video editors. Help her in whatever way you can. And I'll very much encourage all of you to write to me, and I'll forward everything. Or directly go to her website. The website will be published at the end of this video. So thank you so much, Manushi ji, Madhukeshwar ji. Very, very warm regards from us, and a lot of good work you're doing. We'll call you again for a show whenever you have time, next month or next week, whenever you have time.
Okay.